Hello humans, Mr. Bell here with a brand spanking new drawing activity. This activity will mark the beginning of a brand spanking new unit in which we are going to be working on the idea of comic books or comic strips. For this exercise, we're going to be designing a comic book character, thinking about using very simple shapes to make him or her. And the idea of continuity. That's a big fancy pants words for meaning continuous. We're going to be thinking about the idea of drawing this character in a very similar way over and over again to show over time that it's actually the same person, it's just in different boxes. So we're going to title this one first. This is called comic book or comic strip number 1. So COMIC comic strip STRIP, and this is going to be number 1 in this series of drawing activities, and this one should be considered or called continuity. That fancy word we're talking about, that's CONTINUITY, continuity. So again, continuity means the same thing over, and for this exercise, it means the same thing over and over again. So you can tell that it starts at one point and then it ends at a different point, but it's the same person throughout time in this comic strip. So I'm going to draw my first box. When you're talking about comic strips or comic books, these boxes are called frames, so I'm going to refer to these as frames going forward. So I'm going to draw 1, 2, 3. This one's going to be a little smaller just to squish it in. So 1, 2, 3. I'm going to label these frames 1, 2, and 3. So this is going to be my character. Think of him as maybe taking like a series of selfies. So it's going to be just him, and that's it. No background or anything like that. But it's going to be the same shapes over and over again. When you're doing this, I want yours to be different. So think about using maybe a different shape than I'm using. Or think about using a different way to illustrate some facial expressions or something like that. But for my guy, I think I'm going to use just 3 real simple shapes. First one I'm going to use is a square. I'm going to use this square to represent his face. And then I'm going to use just a simple triangle, kind of with its tip cut off, to be his body. And I'm going to just use 2 simple lines to be his arms. And I'm going to add 3 fingers on each hand. And then to make his face, all I'm going to do is I'm going to use a simple circle, another simple circle, and a real simple line just to be his face. So now all of a sudden, some lines, a triangle, a square, and a circle all become something that is pretty universally recognized as a person, right? So you can see this face. So this is a condition that we all have as humans, is we want to recognize faces in everything we see. And comics really utilize that idea that this, even though it's a square and circle and a line, it's a face, and we can pretty much recognize that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say he's going to take a different selfie. So I'm going to use that same idea of that shape of a rectangle or a square, but I'm going to draw maybe a little different this time, just to maybe give him a little bit different of a perspective. So like, see, it's the same shape. It's a little bit different each time, but it's the same shape. And I'm going to draw his eye. Only this time in his selfie, he's going to be sad. So I'm going to use that same idea as a line, but I'm just going to curve it into that pretty recognizably universal frowny face. I kind of put it over to the side, just kind of make it more interesting, but I think it'd be about the same if I put it here. And I'm going to continue that idea of that continuity, that idea that it's the same person over and over again, even though it looks different. I'm going to use that cut off triangle to really illustrate his body. And I'm going to make, maybe because he's sad, I'm going to point his arms down this time. I'm going to use the same amount of fingers. I'm going to use the same basic lines to represent his arms and the same basic shapes to recognize that it's the same person. Remember that word, continuity. So now I'm going to draw my third one, keeping that same box shape. Only this time, I think I want maybe him to make him look like he's angry. So instead of drawing these circles, I'm just going to draw like a little bit of them. And then I'm going to draw a line to represent his eyebrows. And then I'm going to give him a little mouth right there in the middle, keeping that same shape for his body. Even though this one's a little skinnier than this one, you can still see that is basically the same dude, keeping that same amount of fingers. So now this time he is angry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this up, and I'm going to do this a total of 9 times. So I'm going to draw another frame. Remember, when I'm doing this, I'm not caring if they're perfect rectangles, but I am taking my time to make these lines look like they're drawn like this on purpose. Get really into that mode of thinking about being careful with drawing the divider lines. They're a big fat part of comic books and comic strips. So I'm taking my time, but I'm not really that worried that they're perfect. So draw 3 more. So I'm going to fill up the whole page with this. 3. So that's a total of 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to go ahead and label these 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the last one, 9. So again, this one really the only story is that his facial expression and his body language is changing just a little bit. So I'm going to draw this one. I'm going to pick a new emotion. Maybe this one I'm going to draw him looking confused. So I'm going to draw his eye. I'm going to draw maybe his mouth is going to be like this a little bit. So simple lines, but this time illustrating a completely different facial expression, which tells a different story. Keeping that same body shape, drawing those 3 fingers. I'm going to go with this one. This one, I'm going to make him have like a really neutral face. Like he's just kind of staring off into space and has no idea what he's really thinking about. Kind of like this first one, but I think this one looks a little bit more neutral. Keeping that same body shape, that same amount of fingers to keep him recognizable as the same guy. So like these 3 fingers over and over again. The fact that I'm being conscious to use the same amount of fingers each time shows that it's the different guy. If I was to draw one that had a much more realistic hand or something, it might look a little different. So this one, I'm going to really change things up, and I'm going to start thinking about what this person is thinking about. So I'm going to draw his eyes. Maybe he's thinking, this is a pretty good stuff. So I'm going to draw his mouth right there, looking a little derpy. But then I'm going to add pupils to his eye. And I'm going to say, oh, he's clearly part of the story of this facial expression is he's looking this way. Because I illustrated that with just 2 real simple dots in those circles. Making him a little bit more complicated, but keeping him kind of the same guy. Always going with those same arms. I'm going to do it one more time. This time I'm going to be thinking about his eyes too and how those pupils can really change his facial expression. So I'm going to draw that same square. I'm going to draw that same body. Draw those same eyes, and I'm going to be real conscious to kind of try to copy, say, this face, the first one I drew. So I'm going to draw that same line. And this guy and this guy now, they look pretty stinking similar. But as I add a pupil up here, all of a sudden that facial expression really kind of changes. Just with 2 simple dots, now he seems maybe a little bit more thoughtful. Or at the very least, it's telling a story that he's looking at something that's up here. Do it one more time. This time I'm going to draw him as a surprised person, which will make him, maybe his eyes are a little bigger than they were. I'm going to draw those pupils straight on, and I'm going to draw kind of maybe a, whoa, it's like a little disconcerting. He doesn't love what he's looking at. Draw those arms. So you see that, like, when I draw these arms, they're actually like different lengths and different angles, but they're basically the same thing over and over again, so it shows that it's the same person. I'm going to draw my very last one, and in this one, he's going to be just out of control happy. And I'm going to use those same techniques, those same lines, but I'm going to really exaggerate it this time. So he has maybe, this time he has a little bit smaller eyes, and a little big old smile. Finish that. So, again, same guy. over and over again, but little bit of aspects are changed to it, and mostly what I'm really controlling is his mouth and the size of his eyes and the shape of his eyes. But a very different story for each one of these. This is what I want you to do for the rest of the day. I want you to design your own really basic shape comic book character. I want you to draw 9 different frames, and I want you to draw 9 different facial expressions for that same person over and over and over again.